Hey guys, Tom here from the Investing with Tom YouTube channel. Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoyed today's video, hit like, hit subscribe, and that way you can see future videos as well. So today we're going to be talking about the Fiat Chrysler PSA merger that was just announced. As I've mentioned in previous videos, this is one of the few investments in my portfolio that I've sort of made public. So I want to talk through what's happening with the merger, give you a bit of background on the whole situation and some of the reasons behind why the companies are choosing to go down this path. Some of the pros and some of the cons. I think personally, in my initial reaction, is that all of the pros far outweigh some of the cons, but I'm going to get into those details as well as some of the cool things that are going to be happening for shareholders in terms of massive special dividends and some other things that are looking like they're going to come our way. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, hit like, hit subscribe, drop any comments and questions you've got down below. And the final thing with, again, any video like this where we're diving into individual companies, I'm just a guy on the internet. This is just my opinion. So don't take this as financial advice or a recommendation or anything like that. Do your own research, disclaimer, blah, 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 blah. So let's get into the video. Here we go. So first off, just a bit of background on both companies. The company that I invested in about 3 months or so ago is called Fiat Chrysler Automobiles. The name Fiat Chrysler is a little bit misleading, I guess, in terms of what actually drives their business. They own several brands, and neither Fiat nor Chrysler are really major components of what drives their business. The brands that really do drive their business are Jeep. So if you've seen the Jeep Grand Cherokees and so on that have been driving around the streets, that's a Fiat Chrysler car. So Jeep is the big one. Ram Trucks is the big one, which has been experiencing phenomenal growth over the last few years in the sort of pickup truck industry in especially the States we're really talking about here. And they also own a few other brands, so obviously Fiat and Chrysler, minor components relative to Jeep and Ram. And they also own Maserati as kind of a luxury car brand as well. So that's a bit of background on Fiat Chrysler, and that's the kind of brands they own. They have been a phenomenal investment over the last decade for people that have held it for that length of time. They've done some very shareholder-friendly things in the past, such as spinning out Ferrari into its own company. They've paid special dividends of like 10% or more over the last year or so. They've done a lot of things. They're awash in cash. The valuation is quite low in the opinion of several people, including myself. So there's a lot of things to like. Obviously, they're in a very competitive industry, in the car industry, a very capital intensive industry, and a few things that we don't particularly like in what we'd call, I guess, a great business. But the price is extremely attractive and the returns are still, looking pretty favorable. So that's Fiat Chrysler. One of the things that Fiat Chrysler's former CEO, Sergio Marchionne, has spoken at length about, and I've actually just done a video on this a couple of weeks ago, is the relatively low return on invested capital that the car industry sort of experiences. And he saw one of the potential solutions which could have massive financial benefits for a company like Fiat Chrysler as a merger. So merging with other large car businesses where they can share really R&D costs is the big one, but also they have stronger negotiating and purchasing power with their suppliers and so on, and all of these can create a lot of value in terms of cost savings for the overall business. So it is very cool to see that since Sergio is no longer at the company and has passed away, his sort of vision is starting to, unfold with Fiat Chrysler and Mike Manley at the helm. So that's a bit of background on the company itself and some of the things they've been talking about for quite some time. In terms of the investment case, I'll put up a screenshot here. My investment case is pretty simple, to be honest with you, for Fiat Chrysler. They released a business plan for the next few years, and based on the sort of final year of that business plan, there's a little bit of a range, but if we take somewhere in the middle, at the current price, they're trading at about a PE of something like about 1.8 on those future earnings. So if they can execute on that plan and achieve them, very, very cheap. Obviously, a growing company that can execute on something like that is probably not going to trade at a PE of 1.8. So it's currently trading a little bit higher than that. And if it were to trade at, a PE of 4 or 5 or something at that time, we could be looking at a double or more in a relatively short period of time. So the adequate return kind of side of it is there, like we spoke about in the previous video. And there's a lot of downside protection because their balance sheet is managed very conservatively. They have very little debt. They've got a lot of what they call automotive net cash. And the price is low, so there's limited downside in my mind at least, but we'll have to see what happens. So that's Fiat Chrysler, a bit of background on them and my thoughts on why I'm invested in them in the first place. PSA Group is one that I'm a little bit less familiar with, and when we look through our investment checklist of sort of the 4Ms, meaning, moat, management, margin of safety, meaning being basically, do I understand the business? I've probably got some work to do here. So I certainly understand the Fiat Chrysler business and the brands they own and what drives their core profitability and so on. PSA, the company that they're looking to merge with, is one that I'm somewhat familiar with several of the brands. So they own brands like Peugeot and Citroen and Vauxhall, most of those being very European sort of dominant brands, whereas the Fiat Chrysler are more sort of American dominant. So I'm aware of the brands, but there's a little bit of work for me to do there in terms of getting my head around exactly what that business really looks like. So that's PSA and that's Fiat Chrysler. They're looking to merge, long story short. So I'm going to give you some initial thoughts on some of the pros and cons of each and why personally I am 110% on board with this plan. So let's get into some of the finer details. Okay, so going to talk through some of the basic stats on this merger and some of the things that are happening and talk through sort of my thoughts as we go through. So this is a straight up 50-50 merger. So essentially the Fiat Chrysler shareholders and the PSA shareholders will have exactly a 50% share each of the new combined entity. So we are effectively giving up half of our Fiat Chrysler equity to get half of the PSA equity and vice versa in this new sort of merged company. So straight up 50-50 merger. There's no strange splits or anything like that. And just looking at the market cap of both companies, again I might put up screenshots here, but the current market valuation is near enough the same as well. So not really any major arbitrage opportunities or anything like that I can see at least. So that's what it's looking like is going to happen with the sort of equity split in this merger. The other thing that we've got to note is this is probably going to be about a 12 to 15 month process it's looking like. So there's a few things to go through in terms of regulatory approval. So anytime that you have a big merger like this or a company makes a large acquisition, oftentimes there is antitrust sort of legislation and so on to go through. So antitrust is essentially trying to the law trying to avoid companies having a monopoly. So if you are Microsoft, for example, and you just keep buying your competitors anytime someone gets large enough to try and compete against you, that is not something that's something that the government tends to frown upon. So basically just going through and making sure that this new PSA Fiat Chrysler company, which we still don't know the name of what the new entity is going to be called, making sure that there's no monopoly. Listening to the conference call yesterday, it sounds like the management team are very confident that there's not going to be any issues, but we're still looking at kind of a 12 to 15 month timeline. For the rest of the video, I really want to focus on three main points that are really big ones that stood out to me massively in terms of what's happening with this merger. The first one is a special dividend. So Fiat Chrysler, they do have a history somewhat of paying out these special dividends whenever they have more cash than they know what to do with, and this is one of those situations. So Fiat Chrysler, as part of the merger and trying to, I guess, make the valuations of each of these two companies relatively equal before they go in and merge and make it kind of fair and equitable for shareholders of both existing companies, they're going to pay out about 5.5 billion euros in a one-off special dividend when the merger goes through. So if we convert that to US dollars and do some of the maths on what that special dividend looks like. I don't want to run through that calculation on this video or anything, but just trust me that that comes out at current prices at around a 26% one-off kind of dividend. So if you compare that to the S&P 500, I think the current dividend yield of the S&P 500 is a fraction under 2%. So we're getting like, I don't know, 15 years of dividends or something in one hit. So pretty cool situation there. And again, it's just another piece of evidence that the management team at Fiat Chrysler are very, very shareholder friendly, and they want to maximize value for shareholders as much as they possibly can. So big special dividend. That's really the first thing that leapt off the screen at me when I was reading this. I saw this €5.5 billion number, and I was sort of thinking like, man, I'm pretty sure the market cap of Fiat Chrysler is like 19 or 20 billion euros off the top of my head. So big percentage to be paid in terms of a one-off dividend. Pretty phenomenal. Like if you had a $10,000 investment, you're going to get paid like a $2,500 dividend. So pretty spectacular payment there. And that's really the first thing that stood out to me. The second thing that stood out to me is the estimates of synergies between the two companies. So this is something that I basically made a video on a few weeks ago talking about why auto stocks are usually terrible investments. And going through the presentation Confessions of a Capital Junkie from Sergio Marchionne. And basically the moral of the story there was that OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, car companies spend way too much money on research and development, and often research and development that overlaps between their competitors. So if Toyota make a car horn, Fiat Chrysler makes a car horn, VW makes car horns, they're all making car horns, you know. They're all spending that money to do that development work. So when you have two companies merge and being able to share this technology and drivetrain technology and all these sorts of things, they can save a lot of money. And the estimates that came out in the press release are 3.7 billion euros per year. Again, doing some maths on that is going to increase the free cash flow if you sort of apportion that to Fiat Chrysler by around 25%. So, I mean, we've got 25% from a special dividend, near enough, and then we're probably going to, in a couple of years' time, once the synergies have kind of gone through, we're going to have another 25% in cost savings. So we're looking at, we might effectively, you know, assuming market valuations, the multiples and so on stay relatively unchanged, we may be looking at a 50% gain right off the bat from this merger. So pretty unreal numbers there. I'm usually extremely skeptical about things like synergies and companies merging and trying to use each other's technology. But listening to the conference call yesterday, that sounds, to be honest, like a conservative figure. Carlos Tavares, the PSA CEO, and Mike Manley, the current Fiat Chrysler CEO, were both on that call. And Carlos especially was quite optimistic about what they can do and how long that's going to take them. It's looking like they're not going to get that 3.7 billion, you know, right up front or anything, but over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we should be seeing a lot of that. So there'll be some expenses that come along with it to try and merge some of these technologies, but that is going to be hugely beneficial to shareholders. Like some of the numbers in the presentation I talked about the other week are just unbelievable, and it looks like these two companies are going to start utilizing some of those cost savings and synergies. So that was the second thing. The third thing is around the new management. So I won't get into the details of board of directors and so on, but essentially Carlos Tavares is going to be the new CEO of this merged entity. Bit of history on the Fiat Chrysler side. So Sergio Marchionne was CEO for a long time. He produced like just unbelievable results for investors and for the business. He unfortunately passed away, so his sort of sidekick, Mike Manley, has since been the CEO. Mike Manley is a great manager, but he's certainly no Sergio. I think Carlos Tavares might just be another Sergio, just about. Carlos Tavares is a guy that has taken General Motors' European business. General Motors just about near paid him to take the business off them because they were losing millions of dollars every month with that business. And Carlos Tavares turned it around. You know, I heard Monish Pabrai actually talking about the guy not too long ago, and he basically said he can squeeze blood out of a rock. Like, this guy can save a lot of money for businesses, and he can turn them around and make them extremely profitable. And I mean, even on the conference call yesterday, analysts were asking, I might be a bit ahead of myself here, Carlos, but have you thought about trying to turn around the Fiat business and so on within Fiat Chrysler? So I think we might just have a great manager back at the company, and that's something I'm really, really pleased about. So that's what's happening with Carlos. The stories of him going down to, check out plants at the company and so on. He'll fly in. He'll fly coach. He won't fly business class or first class like all his other multi-million-dollar paid executives might. If he wants some lunch, he'll wander down to a local deli and so on. He doesn't get catering brought in and have all his other staff try bringing him food and all those sorts of things. So he seems like a pretty cool guy. Definitely the type of person that I would love to have in charge of just about any company that I own. So some pretty cool stuff happening with this Fiat Chrysler PSA merger. Those are my positives. I just want to talk briefly on some potential negatives that I can see, and then I'll leave you to your day. So let's get into that. Okay, so in terms of some potential negatives with this Fiat Chrysler PSA merger, there's really only one that comes to mind, maybe two. Let's talk about two. The first one is relatively minor in the grand scheme, and that is the costs of rolling out the synergies within the company and getting prepared for these cost savings. We're looking at least a couple of $1 billion or a couple of billion euros is what they're quoting at the moment. Minor cost in the grand scheme if we're going to get closer to 3 or 4 billion in synergies back in 1 year. So it'll be a cost, and there may be some talk about that in articles and so on that come out about that in the short term with short-term minded kind of investors. But over the long term, we should be okay. So that's the first one. My big concern really is the brands that the PSA Group owns. So Fiat Chrysler have worked very, very hard to make themselves as distant as they can from being like a commodity car company. So they don't really produce a lot of the really low cost like Toyota Corollas and things of the world where people are almost buying purely on price. They've gotten more and more towards the higher end of vehicles, especially with their Jeep brand. So you'll see some very expensive and very flash Jeeps driving around on the streets. Some of the Jeep Grand Cherokee with the Jeep SRT versions, all these really high performance, high end kind of cars. Maserati is a relatively small component of their business in the grand scheme, but that's obviously at the high end, and Ram trucks are getting more and more towards that end as well. So Fiat Chrysler has done a lot of things to build brand power and build pricing power through that. So being able to charge more money because they do have these strong brands that people really want. So that's the first thing. I have a feeling that PSA doesn't have that to the same extent. So the brands they own are very much European dominated. So if I've got any European people watching this and you've got opinions, definitely let me know. But they own brands like Peugeot. Peugeot is in New Zealand, but it's certainly not huge. Citroen and Vauxhall, which Citroen is in New Zealand to an even smaller extent. Vauxhall, I don't think I've ever seen, and I have a feeling that is almost like the Holden of Europe. I know that there's some very similar cars to what you might see like a Holden Commodore and that sort of thing in New Zealand or in Australia. But again, I'm going to have to do more research on that because it may have changed since the Top Gear episodes where I saw a Vauxhall on several years ago. So a little bit of work for me to do there, and that's really my main concern, is that we're getting more into the commodity car kind of space and we're getting away from these strong brands, which has been a major asset to Fiat Chrysler. So that's my thoughts overall on the merger. I think the positives are far outweighing the negatives here, and we could be in for some really good long-term results as shareholders. So interested to hear your thoughts on this sort of situation. A merger is something I've never gone through as a shareholder before, so I'm interested to see how it plays out, and I'm even interested to see like some of the what might seem more minor details in the background, like in my brokerage account when the merger goes through, is it suddenly going to have these Fiat Chrysler shares disappear and I've got the shares of this new company. Like, how's all that going to look? So, interested to see. One of the analysts on the call yesterday actually even asked Mike Manley whether the ticker symbol Jeep was taken and whether they might be using that, and he wasn't entirely convinced, but I'm hoping they pick some sort of cool ticker symbol like that as well. Minor details in terms of how the company makes money and so on, but yes, pretty cool stuff going on nonetheless. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit like, hit subscribe. You can watch some old videos over there, hit subscribe over there, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.